So, Berto, we just watched Mandalorian Season 2. We are nerds. Let's talk about it. What do you say?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor, and I'm an OG Star Wars person because I actually saw the original Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, in the theaters in 1977 at the age of 6, and I had no idea what was happening. But I knew that I loved TIE fighters and X-Wings, and I came home and just drew X-Wings and TIE fighters all day long. Who are you, Berto?
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I'm a professional rock appraiser, and I also have a long-standing love of Star Wars. My first conscious experience, or I should say the first explicit memory that I have, was me going to watch Empire Strikes Back in the theater with my dad on the day he broke up with his girlfriend at the time. But as my dad has explained to me numerous times, he had already taken me to see Star Wars, the first one, multiple times in the theater.
But you don't remember you were like 3 years old at the time or something.
Yeah, so I don't have explicit memories of that, but I take their word for it.
Yeah, by the way, this episode is not going to be about psychology or Seattle at all. We are just two nerds who frequently talk about Star Wars, and there's a sliver of the listeners who appreciate it, and so this is for y'all. And also, this is going to spoil the entire Mandalorian 2-season run, and so if you don't,
alert!
Yeah, although it'd be hard not to have it spoiled online anyway at this point because everyone is nerdgasming all over the place. So, rating, Berto, out of 10. How many Bertos?
For the season 2 or the whole series? Or both?
Season 2. Well, I guess both because you gave season 1 like a 5 or a 6 or something.
I think I did 6. Yeah, I think it was 6. I got to go back and revisit. But yeah, so season 1, I gave it a 6 or something close to that. My main problem, and people are like, how could you? So I just thought the dialogue needed beefing up. It was a little too amateurish in my feeling. And there were some actors who actually still bother me in season 2 that were subpar. But overall, I still thought it was cool. I enjoyed a lot of it. The action scenes were great. Season 2, on the other hand, I mean, I agree with you. It started slow, but I'm gonna go ahead because of all the goodness and everything. I'm gonna give it an 8 because like there's so much fun stuff in it, and yeah, it's got a lot of little imperfections and stuff, but it's still a TV show. The TV show bar, though, is very high these days, so I can't fully discount stuff. That said, I thought it was a vast improvement over the first one. The scripts were tighter. The dialogue was better. And although there were still some actors that I'm not crazy about, there were a lot more unbalanced, great scenes, and not just the action. The action was still consistent. In fact, it got better. Like, there's some amazing action scenes. But, yeah, I thoroughly entertained.
Yeah, season 1, I loved the first watch. After rewatching it a little bit, I didn't watch the whole thing over again, but I watched little bits. I realized, oh yeah, I can see the problems, but I kind of consider a rating to be the first watching, how you felt when you watch it. Anytime you go back and rewatch something, there's going to be differences. And so, although sometimes I'll adjust things one way or the other. But anyway, I gave it a 9 out of 10 first season. Second season, I gave a 9 out of 10 as well. But as I was just thinking about it, I thought there's so few things in life that I can just say, you know what? I just loved it. And although it wasn't like a life-altering experience, which sometimes I consider a 10 out of 10 to be reserved for, I just want to reward very, very good art making on television, especially with so many crappy products that are put out these days and so many disappointments, especially in the nerd world and especially in the Star Wars world. and I was just thinking like, well, if I was to demote it to a 9 out of 10, why would it not be a 10 out of 10? And I was just trying to think, well, the little bit that I didn't like about this season is really small. So, I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10.
10.
Now,
yeah.
Is it as life-changing as A Clockwork Orange for me or some of the, Eternal Sunshine of Spotless Mind? No, but in terms of the satisfaction, especially on the heels of episode 9, my God. 10 out of 10 for sure. Rotten Tomatoes.
It gets the episode 9 bump.
Yeah. Rotten Tomatoes critics score, Berto, just for season 2. What do you think?
Oh, Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it a 95.
Wow, 96. You were very close.
Oh.
Audience score.
Oh, the audience loves it. 98.
No, lower, 86.
Wow.
Which is lower than the audience score for season 1, which is
what?
Yeah, it's just bizarre.
Okay, that is surprising to me because from the comments online, I would have imagined the opposite.
Right. All right, let's get into my notes here on what I liked, and then later we'll get into what I didn't like. Of course, going again, spoilers, by the way. This is a season that can absolutely be spoiled. If you plan on watching it, do not listen to the rest of this. Just go watch season 2 and come back here. It's just 8 episodes. It doesn't take long to watch. So do that now. We're about to spoil the last 5 minutes of the last episode. Luke Skywalker was, what do you think? What are your thoughts about him showing up?
Yeah, so when I saw the little baby Yoda meditating at the temple, and he was reaching out through the Force for some Jedi, I knew, well, I guess I hoped and / knew, it's like, because who else was it going to be? I'm like, it's got to be Luke. And then, but I was like, are they going to show, they can't show old Luke. Are they going to do the CG thing? And then I sort of put it out of my mind because I like to be surprised. So I tried not to think about it much. But certainly, as that last episode starts building, I'm like, oh my God, they can't beat these robots, can they? They can't beat the robots. They're going to need some help. Who's going to help them? Who's going to help them? And so when I saw the little X-Wing fighter, I was like, oh my God. The little child in me was so excited. And then the green lightsaber. Yeah, it was, that right there was so satisfying.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I had a different sort of pathway, which is they said, a Jedi, you need to take him to a Jedi will hear him and come to him. Mm-hmm. And in my head, I'm like, well, who would it be? And I didn't really give it much thought. And then later on, I heard a bunch of people freaking out about that last episode. I didn't realize it was the last episode. I thought there were 10 episodes Mandalorian, but of course there's 8 each season. So as we sat down to watch episode 8, I thought, well, a lot of people are freaking out about this episode, but it's not the last episode. So I was thinking like, well, if people are freaking out, it must be about some beloved character. That's the only reason why, or maybe Grogu dies or something. Like I was trying to think of like what could happen. And as the episode was progressing, I thought like, oh, maybe. And then I started talking to Stacy out because we were watching it together. I'm just like, who would it be? And I said, well, I guess who's alive right now? Because this is right after episode 6, right? And I was like, well, of course Luke is around, but they wouldn't bring Luke. That's like over the top. The Mandalorian feels too small for Luke to show up. And then I thought, well, it could be Leia actually. And Stacy's like, Leia? Like she's not a Jedi. And I'm like, well, actually she's strong
with the Force.
Yeah, and in the books, she's just as powerful as Luke is with Force powers and lightsabers and stuff. And of course, they've done away with that storyline, but it wouldn't be strange to think about Leia at this point having power to show up, maybe with other people, who knows. But she's not exactly a Jedi. And then I thought, well...
She couldn't train him very well. I guess she could, based on the new movies, but...
Right. Yeah. And then I thought, well, it could be Mace Windu, I was thinking, because we never actually saw Mace Windu die. We just saw him
really?
Yeah, we just see him get thrown out of the Emperor's office, right?
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he just gets thrown off. And it's always been a question, did Mace Windu live?
Survive?
Now, he probably didn't, because if he did, then we would have seen him at some point. But I was thinking, well, it's got to be Mace Windu, because Luke and Leia, that's over the top. So, and then I was thinking, well, there are other Jedi who are around, because I watch the Clone Wars and Rebels and all these other shows, and there's always these
Yeah.
some Jedi that is hidden somewhere and hiding. And I was like, maybe one of those people will show up. But I thought, well, that no one would be freaking out about some random rebels Jedi that would show up. And then when the X-Wing shows up, yeah, I still was like, it can't be Luke. It just can't be. And then the green lightsaber, and I was like, still,
What?
it can't be Luke. It just can't be. And then he looked a little short, and so I thought, well, it could be.
It's a little short for a stormtrooper.
Yeah, I thought it could be Leia, right? And then when I saw the belt buckle, that's when I was like, it's Luke. Yeah, I was freaking out. CGI Luke, Berto, what'd you think?
I mean, it's a mix. I feel like there were moments that I was like, okay, that works, but there were moments where it didn't work, and it was sort of disappointing because they have so much. They have so many great examples nowadays of machine learning getting people's faces really, really right. And I thought, well, for this show, they'll pull out all the stops. They already did a really close job with Leia, and they're getting better and better. But there are still some pretty uncanny moments. And so overall, that moment I was a little conflicted about.
Yeah, someone actually did a side-by-side of the show along with their own deepfake.
Yeah.
So there's people who have deepfake software that's not very complicated. You just have to dial in a few things, and it's like auto-tuning for visuals, right?
Yep.
And the deepfake looked better. Not like massively better, but definitely better. So the CGI I thought was pretty bad, and especially in 5 or 10 years from now, we're going to look back at that and go
totally.
like, that is, and you said Leia was pretty good, but actually when you rewatch the Leia CG,
It's not that good.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't that good to begin with, but the thing about Leia is that she's on screen, her face is on screen for probably a total of like 6 seconds at the most or something.
I see.
This one, they really linger, and I thought, they shouldn't have done that. They should have given, I'm guessing it's a budgetary thing or who knows, or just a technology thing, who cares? The point is that they could have directed this scene in a way that they didn't really linger on the face that long.
Totally. They could have had one scene where he says a line, and that they spent all their budget, all their time on, get it as good as possible. And then the rest is like show him from behind, show him in the shadow, all these things.
So I thought that was a little weird, but when I was watching it, I did not effing care.
I know. I was the same.
I was just like, oh my God, because I guess I hadn't thought, okay, what would Luke look like? But of course, that's what he looked like. This is right after episode 6.
And he's more of a badass because he's, gotten stronger.
Yeah, but he had a very different look in episode 6. He had that very calm, very combed hair.
Yeah.
And I thought it was terrible CG, but I did not care at all. And it's a small show, so what are you going to do? It's just like, it's a story. You don't have to be, we all know that it's not real. Just sort of hand yourself over.
Well, it was the same feeling I had actually at the end of Rogue One.
Yeah.
Where I guess you're right. I mean, when I think back, it's not like Leia didn't look also a little weird, but I also didn't care. I was like, oh, they had me. They had me. So the overall feeling I had was, that's Luke Skywalker, and he saved us all. But the critic in me was certainly like poking holes at the CG.
Yeah. And also, the great thing about this scene, of course, for a lot of the fans, is that it vindicates Luke from episode 8. Mm-hmm. And for me, well, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, first of all, we never really got to see Luke at the height of his powers,
right?
I mean, you could argue that in episode, is it 8? Which is the one where he does the standoff with...
Yeah, 8.
Yeah. There is a moment of great power there shown. In fact, maybe even, well, definitely greater power because he can like project his body and all these things. However, we definitely had seen him sort of like in this grumpy mode and like dishevelly and didn't really show off, like, really, this is what you became? This was the equivalent of the Darth Vader scene in Rogue One, where that scene in Rogue One where you see Darth Vader just plowing through, you're like, yeah, that's why we fear Darth Vader. This is why we root for Luke Skywalker. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is the first chance to see the payoff of the discipline and listening to Obi and listening to Yoda. Because at the end of Return, the one thing we didn't see is him being a full-on, acrobatic badass, because that was not the journey. But this shows off that, like, because of all that hard work, now he's an acrobatic badass. Right. Acrobatic meaning, like, he's just, like, so coordinated, so, it's like the Gamorrean Guard scene times 11,
Right. Yeah, I totally, I'm right there with you. But to me, in Episode 8, I had enough of an imagination to imagine that, well, in the preceding 30 years from Episode 6 to Episode 8, yeah, Luke kicked butt, but he has seen some stuff between then and now he no longer is that person anymore, and it is unexpected, but I can imagine, I can fill in the gaps.
Sure.
So when I saw this scene, I loved it, of course, but at the same time, I wasn't like, finally, they erased Rian Johnson's terrible Episode 8. To me, I liked Episode 8. Looking back, especially in watching Episode 9, I can see now why Episode 8 is bad in some ways. It's not even close to Episode 9, of course. And if you're curious as to what we mean by Episode 9, we're talking about the movies. Whenever we say just Episode 9, it's sort of like saying Cher. You don't need to say Cher's last name. You just say Cher.
Does she have a last name?
I don't know. But so yeah, I was also kind of happy for those other nerds who hated Episode 8 and were finally given that. I felt like, okay, maybe they'll shut up now, kind of a thing. And then, of course... I
don't know if they would, though, right? Because they...
Well, they're not going to shut up about how Episode 8 sucks, but they're going to shut up about how the Disney universe isn't ruining Star Wars for everybody. Because, of course, this is the same Disney that created Episode 8 and 9. They also created Mandalorian. You know what I mean?
That's right. Although it is a little puzzling to me because, like, the moments in this show where I'm like, oh, I can just imagine the same people complain. Because, like, there's a team of women that are really badasses and they're kicking ass. They're going to complain about that because I thought they're the same kind of toxic people. But I guess when it comes just to, the Episode 8 thing, I think the things that I didn't like, I don't know if they overlap with the things that grouping didn't like, because for me, it was really all about, to be fair, I didn't like to see Luke in the jaded state. And I guess because they didn't earn it, like they didn't actually show me how he got to be that way. So it was an unrecognizable Luke Skywalker, and I hadn't seen why. And they never really showed us why. They showed us briefly, like, well, his student went bad. Really? That was it, man. It's not very resilient.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but for me, I filled in those gaps. I think that if you had shown us the progression there, if you would have given more expositional past scenes, flashbacks, it might have helped. But anyway.
Well, did you ever see the original Mission Impossible movie and the original show in the 70s?
Yeah.
Okay, so the original show I loved, one of my favorite things of all time. When I saw the Mission Impossible movie with Tom Cruise, they made the good guy from the TV show the bad guy. And it wasn't like the actor, but playing a different character. It was the character and the actor. And so I was so incensed. I was like, how dare you? The good guy from the TV series is the bad guy. And they didn't earn it. They just made him the bad guy. That's an extreme, but that's sort of how I felt about Luke becoming this grump. I was like, why? You didn't earn this. But anyways.
So R2-D2, when he showed up, I thought, at first I was like, oh, R2 always shows up. Then I was like, well, of course he'd be there because it's Luke. What other mech droid is he going to bring with him? He's going to bring R2 with him. So, of course.
That's right.
All right. So other things that I liked about this, and this is what I loved about the first season, was that these are little stories. We're not talking about galactic level issues here.
Yeah.
It touches on it kind of, but they're little stories, especially if you just look at some of the episodes where Mando or Din will just be on a planet and there's just this little mission that they have to do. Or getting a mother with some eggs from one planet to the other planet.
And Grogu keeps eating the eggs.
Right. To me, I really get tired of these, and you could say episode 9 is like the most extreme, violator of this premise. That in episode 9, it was like they needed to include everything, and it needed to be the entire universe, and so many, and so I really love stories that can limit themselves, and because I find that when you have a bad script or a bad writer, then you write like a 7-year-old, and then this thing, and a lot of comic books are like this too, right? Like, what's Galactoid or the Silver Surfer heralds what thing that comes and eats entire planets and stuff, and it's just like, come on, like, what happened to Superman just helping someone who's falling off of a building? Like, why does it always have to be just this humongously boring thing? It just gets so out of control and you can't relate to it anymore, and it just feels stupid. So anyway, I really like that about season 2. I also kind of like the darkness of this season when Moff Gideon tries to kill himself. That was dark for a Disney production. When the ship blows up.
Fully destroyed. Well, that was hilarious too, right? Because that ship went through so many partial destructions, and every time we can rebuild it. We got the technology. And that time it was like, yeah, I think that one's done.
Yeah. I rewatched that scene this morning, and they really went for it with the special effects. They were just like, look, make sure you blow this thing to smithereens.
There can't be any question that it's over.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that you don't get precious about everything. People can die, things can blow up. You can can lose. When Bill Burr kills that officer, as we were watching that scene, I was like, oh, he's getting angry, but. This is Disney. He's not going to shoot him cold blood.
Right.
But then he just pulls out his gun and shoots him. And I thought, oh man, this is going to get ugly. They're in the middle of a empire stronghold.
When even Mando was shocked, he's like, what did you just do?
But again, they paid that off really well, because you're thinking, well, how are they going to get out of there? Because they got to go back through the hangar. But then you realize, oh, there's the windows, of course. And I'm like, oh, but that's going to get kind of hairy. And then, of course, you have these 2 sharpshooters that were ready to go, which made sense. And they were helping them out. And so none of it felt cheap. It felt like, oh, no, this is bad. Oh, okay, well, now they got a little bit of... And that leads me to another compliment that I'll give the writers and directors is the fight scenes. That the fight to create a good, and I've always marveled at the Clone Wars about this as well, the cartoon. Mm-hmm. Every week you have another episode, and you have to have at least one fight scene, right?
Right.
Maybe 3 fight scenes to write a good fight scene, to have a build up, to choreograph it, to have the CG work out, to have the storyboard worked out, to
and not have it be repetitive every single time.
Right. To not have it be repetitive, because. And of course, that's what episode 9 does. In order to make it not repetitive, they just invent new powers so that they don't have to repeat the old things. They just say, well, how about she can do this now? How about she can do that now? How about Palpatine can just come back? Instead of working with what you got and saying, how can we actually use our creative talent to create something entertaining, even though we don't break the entire system, And so this season did that really well.
Imagine if in the series Kung Fu, or, like every episode he has some new power.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize my pinky can do the death touch now.
Right. There was this show that I used to watch on reruns as a kid called Rat Patrol, and it was about World War II in Africa. And it was just like 2 or 3 guys in a Jeep that would go on missions, and every week they had to live within normal reality of Africa in World War II. You had grenades and guns, and and a Jeep, and you couldn't just invent new things as
New
a cheap,
lasers and
yeah. And so season 2 does that really well. Also, the fight scenes were very rarely boring. There was only one fight scene when I thought, okay, this is getting a little long, and that was at the temple where Boba Fett shows up.
Oh, sure. Yeah, although I still, I think what it is they tastefully up the ante. They did, because they introduced the Darksaber at the end of the last season, and it's like, ooh, what's that? But it wasn't like this magical thing that ends the worlds, right? It was just like a lightsaber that now you have to contend with, because even though it still can't cut through your armor, it can come close, and it's more dangerous. And then the robots. Well, the robots weren't like a 20-foot tall robot that can stomp you. It was a better fighter that you're not as strong as, and there's a whole bunch of them, and only at the end. And so it was the right progression of powers rather than the exponential escalation.
Right. They introduced these badass droids for the Empire, but it takes them a long time to power up.
Yep.
And there's very few of them. You can't there's not just an assembly line of these things. And that's just smart writing, I consider. The other thing I loved about this season was there were many, many nerd moments, and I actually had to watch YouTube videos to point out all the nerd moments that I didn't pick up on. And we call this fan service, but they were not obvious. There were moments when I was like, "Oh, that's fan service." Luke showing up, for example. So, oh, that's fan service. Right. But I'm like, but it's earned, and it doesn't feel manufactured, because of course, if there is a force-sensitive creature in the world, then of course Luke would be the one who that creature should go to. I mean, it just makes sense. And so,
by the way, even the R2D2 moment, you're right. Who would it be? Well, it'd be R2D2. Second, they didn't actually do the episode 1 thing, which is like, ooh, who's that? Oh, I call him R2D2. Did you write that down? Write it down. Remember it.
Right.
And all the interaction is just him. We don't know what was said. He just goes, doo, 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 and Baby Yoda kind of goes, it was great. It was subtle. I mean, subtle as in it wasn't overdone,
Right.
And it was earned.
Right. When Horatio Sands, he plays Mithril, he points at this transporter having big value on the black market. Do you remember this moment?
Wait, who was Mithril? Which character?
He was the blue guy, the guy that's he was the bounty in the very first episode.
I remember now. Okay.
So he points to this transporter and he's like, "Do you know how much value that has in the black market?" Well, what that's a reference to is that transporter was an extremely rare vehicle that you could buy in the 80s.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was a very rare item in the Star Wars eBay universe, where it's like thousands of dollars now because they're so rare.
Oh, nice.
And it's very
nice
famous.
Reference.
It's very famous for that. And so he points to that, and so you don't, as a casual viewer, you would just, he's just commenting on how something really matters.
Was that one of the Jabba transporters or no?
No, this was when they were in the
no, I remember the scene. Oh. Yeah, I remember the scene. I'm just wondering, in the original, was it like an Empire transporter?
Yeah, it was a Stormtrooper transporter.
Okay.
And then, of course, Bib Fortuna shows up. But again,
He's gained a few pounds.
Yeah, but they don't dwell on it that long. They show the outer scene of Jabba's palace, and then they just quickly go to Bib Fortuna sitting on the throne, and it's just like, right away, just literally in 2 seconds, you know exactly what's happening. And you don't have to be a fan of the show to appreciate the scene.
Yeah, you could have imagined this long dialogue. Bib, I didn't expect you here. Oh, after Jabba died, I was elected. He's like, we don't need it. We don't need it.
Yeah, we just go, it makes total sense. He was kind of like second in command.
Yeah.
He was a sleazebag.
He wasn't on the transporters.
So of course, he would be there. And also Bo-Katan. So you don't watch the Clone Wars, the cartoon.
No.
For Bo-Katan to show up she's a Mandalorian.
Is she the Battlestar Galactica?
Yeah, she's Starbuck,
okay.
Katie Sackhoff, from Portland, Oregon, by the way, not too far from us. And for her to show up, again, to a casual viewer like Stacy or you, I guess,
Yeah.
you're just like, okay, Mandalorian, interesting. But to me, watching the Clone Wars, she's like a major character, and for her to show up, it just feels right because it makes sense that she would.
She
show
didn't
up.
do the voice, did she? In the
She
cartoon?
did. She did.
Oh,
do
she
the voice.
did.
Yeah, yeah. She does a lot of voice acting actually. From
So
what I
that's
understand.
double. Like,
Yeah.
that's the voice, and it's the character become real.
Yeah, and if you're a Battlestar Galactica fan,
Of course, sure.
Starbuck being on screen in any nerd production, you're just
Yeah,
like, yay. Of course,
so funny.
Boba Fett showing up and Slave One showing up.
Oh yeah, no, that was so fun.
Yeah, again, it's that riding that line between absurd and not absurd, right?
And they teased it in the first season, which is so well done because they didn't. They could have blown their deck of cards really easily, and they kept it really tight until the actual moment of reveal. You know.
Right. So it felt like it made sense. Tusken Raiders, having got to meet them a little bit more. Also, when Cobb Vanth, played by Timothy Olyphant in the first couple episodes,
That was fun.
he's
I love
writing.
him too.
Yeah, he's great. He's a great actor. He is writing on what looks to be a pod racer engine, and it looks like it could be Anakin's pod racer engine, which is another kind of callback in that way. And then, of course, Ahsoka showing up, which is even better
So
for me.
Ahsoka, I saw again. I don't watch, but I know of her. So I was like, oh, that's the. I was like, that's the Jedi in one of those cartoons.
Right. So for those who don't know, Ahsoka is essentially one of the lead characters in the Clone Wars. You have Obi-Wan Kenobi, you have Anakin Skywalker, and you have Ahsoka. So Obi-Wan is Anakin's master, and Anakin is Ahsoka's master. And the three of them are in virtually almost every episode. And so
cool.
you could argue that Ahsoka is our stand-in. She's the person who is kind of a fish out of water.
Sure.
She's the one who has to prove herself. She's the one who has to overcome her fears because Obi-Wan, of course, is sort of beyond that. And Anakin is kind of beyond that as well. Anakin already is like really, really good. And Ahsoka is still struggling with that. And the story going into the Rebels and her story, you could argue that Star Wars, if you watch all the stuff, Ahsoka has the most rich, longest story arc. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. How much of the like in those cartoons, how much of it do they spend with Anakin going bad, or is it he's not really there yet? Is he?
They do not do that. I mean, not bad, but they definitely explore the notion of the balance in the Force. They really go into detail on that a lot more in some kind of annoying ways.
I'm gonna have to watch.
Yeah, there are some. Mace Windu is great, and then the other thing about the Clone Wars is great is they go into the lives of the clones. You get to know like individual clone officers and soldiers, which is kind of cool.
So is the Clone Wars? There's two cartoons, right? There's the Clone Wars and there's Rebels, or
so there's the Clone Wars, the cartoon movie. And then there's the Clone Wars, the series, which is the same characters essentially.
And is it the CGI looking stuff?
No, well, it's definitely cartoony. You know, it's
I just remember one. I remember one cartoon that had like more of the. It was like a CG production versus another one that was more drawn. I don't know.
Yeah, the Clone Wars movie seems a little bit more drawn, and the cartoon feels a little bit more computer.
Okay.
Although I'm sure they're both computer. The Rebels is let's see. Yeah, the Rebels is after episode. No, it's between episode 3 and 4. The Clone Wars is in between episode 2 and 3. So Anakin is about to go bad, and then Rebels is after, as the buildup of the Rebel Alliance, essentially.
I see. Right. So if you watch all that, and then you see Ahsoka on the real screen, like a human version, or sorry, a flesh and blood version.
Yeah.
Then it's got to be another nerd moment for sure.
Yeah, totally. And I always wondered if Ahsoka would show up in a live action thing, because her character would be really hard to create in Flesh and Blood because she has that weird head thing, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, they'll probably never do that because it'd be so impossible. It'd be one thing to have, calamari that you don't really focus on. They just say it's a trap and that's it. But to have like a main character that you follow around, I thought, well, they can't do that because her head thing looks so weird. But they really pulled it off in this.
They nailed it. Yeah. There was a thing that I really loved in the second to last episode. Was it second to last? The one where they bring Bill Burr back and they're having to break into because there's that moment when they're being chased by the rebels, but the rebels are probably fighting for their territory because the Empire's taken over their land, right? So, but we're meant to feel like they're the bad guys in the moment, and they're disguised as Empire, running in an Empire vehicle. And they get saved by the Empire and cheered by the stormtroopers. And in the moment, all of us are going, yes! And they pulled it off really brilliantly because it was us all cheering for the Empire momentarily.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that too in the moment. I thought, wait a second, why are we cheering? But it puts you into the shoes of the average soldier on the Empire. That just like any army, just like any war, every regular soldier is just a human trying to survive. And they don't know the political forces, or they don't have any power over the political force. The other great thing about Ahsoka is that she says, the Force. You don't know about the Force? And he's like, his powers, Grogu's powers. Oh, yeah, it's called the Force. It's created by all living things. And when she said that, I was like, yes.
Nice.
Yes.
They still talked about MC count, right?
Yeah, we'll get to that when I talk about my dislikes. That's one of my main things. But anyway, Grogu is great. I loved that Grogu is now out of the storyline because, of course, I love Grogu. I love Baby Yoda. Yeah, they integrated him into the storyline really well. It wasn't annoying, but I was like, okay. When I was like, oh, I bet you if they do Mandalorian in the future, Grogu isn't gonna be there, and I thought that's great because get out while you're ahead before Grogu becomes Scrappy Doo or whatever.
And then he's talking, hey Mando, I can help out.
Right.
Let me in.
Yeah, or it becomes like the TV show 24 season 5 where
Grogu's gone missing again.
Yeah, it just gets ridiculous. At some point you just got to like get away from that common plot of like Grogu is, anyway.
And they resisted the temptation. I was thinking they were going to do it where at the end he was going to say his first words and they were going to be Mando.
Yeah. Right. Episode 9 would have done that. George Lucas would have done that. Like it would have been, I think I've been saying Grogu, but it's Grogu.
Grogu. Yeah.
Anyway, the puppet was perfect throughout the series. To pull it off, an actual, flesh and blood puppet with emotion and personality and cuteness was really quite a feat. So, all the designers and the puppet, engineers and the people who ran the puppet, it was just amazing.
Well, and the fact is that it kept getting cuter or it never got old. Like, it was weird because you would think it's like after a while, you're like, all right, yes, Baby Yoda's cute. But instead I found myself always like, oh, it's a new thing he's doing. Oh, that's how. And even when he's being bad, like eating eggs, you're like, oh, so adorable.
So that was another dark thing that they allowed into the show where it wasn't just eating eggs. It was eating not only a mother's children, but the main mission was trying to get her and her babies to this other thing. And every time you turn around, they're going extinct. And I mean, that's some dark stuff right there.
That's dark.
I loved the X-Wing cops scene. What did you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so, okay, that I loved. So there was a moment in the first season that I didn't like that everyone seemed to love. And it was when the two speeder bikers were talking. And everyone loved it because it was so funny. But it actually took me out of the suspension of disbelief because their way of dialoguing, their dialect and the things they were saying, they tried to make it contemporaneous, like us humans in the year 2020 or something, 2019, wherever it was. And so I was like, well, that's not how Star Wars talks. they wouldn't be saying stuff like that. So you're making it's almost like a Family Guy episode of Star Wars, not a Star Wars moment. And I didn't like that. But the X-Wing fighters one, I loved because they actually didn't do that. I still felt like these were rebel fighters, but they were having sort of like an actual conversation about things. And then when they showed up, they were like, yeah, I guess they would be sort of like the cops, but they weren't acting like human cops. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I was totally surprised of how they wrote that scene. It's just a sign of good writing and people who know the universe to be able to essentially invent a brand new thing, but to make it make absolute sense. Of course, the New Republic is now in charge, and the rebels are now the mainstream army guys.
The police, yeah.
And so now they're in charge, and now they're the cops, and they're going to fly X-Wings, and they're going to talk like X-Wing pilots, but they're also going to be the bad guys. They're the guys pulling over Mando because he doesn't have his papers, you know?
Papers, please.
Yeah, and they're like, and they weren't pulling any punches. They're just like, we got a criminal, let's go get him. And the way they shot the X-Wings, and it's just actually also a marvel at Lucas and his team back in 1975, 1976, when they were designing all the things, that they could make such a cool ass spaceship like the X-Wing, and it just because it's the same one. They took the same design from
so
episode
iconic.
4, 5, and 6, and it's when those wings separate, they're like, you know, they're like, oh, we got someone on we gotta get ready for an attack, and you see those wings open up, and you're just like, oh, it just looks so cool. Anyway.
Oh, speaking of which, the moment in the last episode where they launched the TIE fighters, and kind of like reminiscent of Battlestar.
Right.
Like, that was so cool.
Yeah. Both instances make no sense because it's like, why do you need like a launch tube? But anyway, the art at the end of every episode, I've loved from the beginning. But let's take a break, and we get back. Let's continue nerding out. What do you say, Berto?
Let's do it.
Hey, deserving listeners, as you know, I'm constantly recommending that people go to therapy. We all need therapy from time to time. One of the options available that is definitely worth checking out is BetterHelp.com. So if you're looking for a therapist, I would give it a try by going to BetterHelp.com/Kirk. Make sure you use the /Kirk because you get 10% off your first month, and it helps us out. I get a lot of emails from you saying that you're looking for a therapist. As you watch these videos, I know many of you have been motivated to find your own therapist. But I know it can be really hard to find a good one to work with. Like I said, one of the options available to try is BetterHelp.com/Kirk. And you should know that this service is available to clients worldwide, which is amazing. I've been told that you can start communicating with your therapist in under 24 hours. You can message with your counselor anytime. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. And I've been told that it's often less expensive than in-person therapy. So go to BetterHelp.com/Kirk to get 10% off your first month of therapy today. All right, we're back from the break. So, Berto, if X-Wing cops were to get every listener to become a patron of the podcast, what would they sound like?
We're coming up on the ship now. Okay, it looks like they're pulling over. Yep, they're pulling over by that asteroid. All right, I'm just going to go right beside them here. So listen, the reason we pulled you over is because, well, first of all, you were flying without your headlights on. We have a recommendation, sir. I think you will find in the planet, the second moon of the planet Jar Jafar, you will find that there is a place called psychologyinseattle.com, and there are some creatures that will eventually evolve to what eventually will be called humans, but they can help you if you become patron of their podcast. So please turn on your headlights. It's fine. I get that you have 6 heads, sir, but that doesn't matter. Like, you still need to be able to see where you're going. Oh, you can see in the infrared and the ultraviolet. Well, fine. But still, please do us a favor. Turn them on and be safe out there.
Yeah, I forgot. It would be, it's in the past. You must have heard the TPS reports line.
So I didn't like that. I don't like it when they make pop culture references because it's Star Wars. Why are they making a joke about Office Space?
Yeah.
And I get it. Everyone I got in an argument with disagrees. But for me, I'm sitting there watching. Never, in episode. Well, maybe I'm wrong because maybe since I wasn't an adult, maybe there were pop culture references. But as far as I can tell, in Star Wars 4 through 6,
oh yeah,
at least 4 and 5, I don't remember anything about our modern current world at all.
No. Well, I think maybe the issue for you, Berto, is that this is a joke. TPS reports. You probably, since Office Space came out 21 years ago, you've probably made a TPS report once a week since that time. And so to you, to hear a TPS report joke in a TV show, you're just like, it's very obvious to you. To me, I don't make, in fact, I think you reintroduced me to the TPS report joke. I think, I'd obviously seen Office Space a bunch of times, but then at some point, I don't know, like 8 years ago, you said TPS report, and I'm like, what's that? You're like, oh, from Office Space. And I was like, oh, yeah. And obviously to someone like Stacy, it didn't even mean anything to her. And so to my ears, I get about one TPS report a year, and it's probably from you. And so for me to hear that, it doesn't really ring out. In fact,
doesn't bother you.
It took me a few seconds to even realize. I was like, wait, did he just say T? He just did say T. That's funny, But to you, it's like a joke you say all the time.
Well, to me, it's the equivalent of like the Imperial commander that they were talking to in the mess hall, going like, you know what I like to do with rebels? I like to cook them and eat them with fine Chianti and some fava beans.
Right, because you make that joke all the time as well.
Right. So basically, to me, it was like chalk nails on a chalkboard. And the other thing is, so like I love Office Space. I think that's fantastic. And by the way, Easter egg. There is, if anyone sees my profile on Facebook and they want to do some snooping, there is a job listing on there that I'm supposedly, that's my job. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, who knows? But it might or may not have something to do with Office Space. So, but to see it in Star Wars, I'm like, no, don't make any jokes, no references. I don't exist. We don't exist. This is nothing. Don't say it. Now, why do they speak English? Okay, fine. But my hypocrisy goes only so far. So
I loved that there were lots of non-white actors. You had Paul Sun Hung Lee as the X-Wing pilot. He's a Korean American. He actually plays the father in Kim's Convenience, which is a pretty funny show. You have Ming Na Wen, who played Fennec Shand. She was one of the bounty hunters, Chinese American. So you have some good Asian characters in there. Of course, you got Pedro Pascal, who plays Mandalorian. He's Chilean. You have awesome. Tamara Morrison as Boba Fett. He's Maori and white. You have
so good.
Mercedes Vernado as Casca Reeves, African American woman. Giancarlo Esposito plays Moff Gideon, and he's black and Italian. You have Omid Abtahi, who plays Dr. Pershing, who is Iranian. You have John Leguizamo, who is from your neck of the woods in Bogota. You have Carl Weathers, who is black. You have Horatio Sands, who is also Chilean. And you have Rosario Dawson plays Ahsoka Tano. She is Cuban, Puerto Rican.
By the way, I was so happy to see Rosario Dawson because I love her.
So
she's awesome.
To me, I was not as excited. I mean, I love her, and I'm glad she is Ahsoka, but for some reason, even though the voice actress is white, I always imagined her to be Asian. I don't know why. So in my head, if you would have said, okay, what race of a character would, of course, the character is not human, so the character is some other race. But to me, I always just imagined an Asian person. But it's just me. There were just a handful of white characters, and so it's just good to see.
Do you know that I didn't know that John Leguizamo? I'm a huge fan, always loved him. I didn't know he was from Bogota.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I have such a love for him. His Netflix special about Latino about Latin history is really amazing if you haven't watched it. But the thing that I always remember him from is in high school I saw an HBO special of him doing a one-man show, and I just remember just being transported from the world that he lived in, and the comedy and the heart that was in this one man show was just amazing. Anyway, he introduced, or this show introduced a lot of spin-offs. You know, it's clear that season 2, they're like, we as Disney are going to set up a bunch of spin-offs, but they did it without making it obvious to me anyway. The Book of Boba Fett, which is coming out, which I'm excited to watch.
That should be very cool.
Ahsoka is having a show where she's hunting Grand Admiral Thrawn, which, if you're familiar with the books and the video games, Thrawn is a very interesting character that we should all be interested in seeing on the TV show. Rangers of the New Republic, which is set during the timeline of The Mandalorian after Episode 6, and it is, I believe, like sheriffs of the New Republic. And then, of course, Mandalorian Season 3, I think.
Yeah, I hope they make another, they can take it in a different direction. But
Right. And I think it's going to focus on the Bo-Katan Din storyline, if that makes any sense. Sure. But they have other shows coming out too, which I'm looking forward to. You have Andor, which the Rogue One guy, the main guy of Rogue One, we're going to see his life before he dies in Rogue One. The showrunner is Tony Gilroy, who worked on Rogue One, but also Tony Gilroy worked on the screenplays of the Bourne series and also wrote and directed Michael Clayton, which had a lot of acclaim. There's an Obi-Wan Kenobi show coming out with Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, by the way. Huh. So I think this is going to occur during the Clone Wars, right?
Nice.
Showrunner Joby Harold, which worries me because it's the producer-writer of King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, which was one of the worst movies I have ever seen in my life.
I have not had the pleasure.
And then there's a few cartoons, The Bad Batch, which is executive producer Dave Filoni, which worked on Mandalorian and Clone Wars. You have The Acolyte, which is a live action created by Leslie Headland, who is the showrunner creator of Russian Doll. So that's going to be interesting if you ever saw that TV show.
Yeah.
And this is going to happen like 200 years before Episode 4, so like 150 years before Episode 1. And it's going to be like a dark sort of... Anyway. There's also a Lando show. We don't know who's going to play Lando. Donald Glover has not confirmed that he's going to play it, but Justin Simeon of Dear White People is going to be the showrunner. Then you have Visions, which is an anime, and then you have A Droid Story, which is going to be a cartoon. So there's like 10 or 11 Disney Plus Star Wars television shows that are coming out, which I'm looking forward to. I'm sure some of them are going to be not so great, but as long as one of them is great, then I'm happy about it. Just to close here, what we didn't like, the M count thing. Dr. Pershing says that we didn't get enough blood with M count. So of course this is referring to midi-chlorians, which I don't appreciate, which essentially validates that whole idea.
Yep.
And somehow just ruins the whole thing again, because it's like this idea that people are born with the Force, which of course has not an idea that was present in Episode 4, 5, and 6. Anyone could tap into the Force if they were trained well, if they had the right teacher, if they had the right... you got the sense that Luke wasn't strong with the Force because of his dad, but he was strong with the Force because he had a lot of passion. At least that was my interpretation, was that Luke had passion. He had adventure in his heart. He was ambitious and strong and had potential. And it was just a part of his character that he was, quote unquote, strong with the Force. It wasn't just, he didn't have magical creatures in his blood.
Yeah, I mean, even if there had been some sort of like familial thing, I didn't appreciate making it an explicit like biological element. And they could undo it, by the way, without just pretending like it didn't happen. There could be realizations that happen where they're like, oh, midichlorians? No. We found out through Dr. Hillebert's research that was a dead end. Like, it turns out that, because look at Jedi such and such, like, they could actually write themselves out of that mess. And and just open it up, which I thought was what Ryan, what's his name, was doing.
Right.
With, showing us that, anyone can cook.
Right. Well, the thing that I thought we were all deciding was that we were just going to ignore the M word altogether.
Sure.
That we were just going to forget that ever happened and just say, let's just forget that word was ever mentioned.
Yeah.
But I also thought, because they show the clones, which look like Snokes, right? And I thought, I mean, maybe through these series, they'll explore that further, which seems likely. Because that is what they're building towards, right? They're saying, well, we're now after 6, and we're building towards the First Order, which is going to have Snoke and Palpatine. And I thought, well, maybe Episode 9 will be a little less annoying if they give us a satisfying backstory. Okay, fine. It's from M count blood, but maybe Episode 9 won't be as bad if they flesh that out, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I didn't like the Force Temple, on that planet, because it is absolutely just magic. It's just like religion. It takes it away from the way the Force felt in Episode 4, 5, and 6, and makes it into essentially a religion, and makes it into some magical force, makes it into some wizard thing, and now it's all over the place in the Clone Wars cartoons. This magic and wizards and temples. I mean, there's a planet that is like the center of the universe that possesses the most force power of all the world, all the universe, all the galaxy, and Yoda goes there and interacts with like ghosts and stuff, and it's really dumb. But the Clone Wars, they had to make several episodes, and so there's some episodes where it's just like, eh. But I didn't, I sort of thought, well, I thought in The Mandalorian, we're going to keep this grounded. I thought we were going to sort of not entertain those silly ideas. So I didn't like the Force Temple thing. There's another way they could have done that scene where Ahsoka just like, bonds with Grogu and says, let's reach out in the Force together. And they just sit there and they reach out, and then she says, oh, I feel in the Force that Grogu touched a Jedi, and so it's your job to find that Jedi, but I don't know where that Jedi is, and neither does Grogu. You could have done it without the temple. The temple was a plot device that was supposed to call Luke. You needed to have something that called Luke. And maybe the stormtroopers are coming as Ahsoka and Grogu are bonding, and maybe there's a force bubble around them. It's not a shimmering blue magical wizard force, but it's like some kind of force. And you could have, I don't know, you just could have written it differently. And what did you think of the Force Temple?
I see what you're saying. It didn't personally bother me because as far as the stretching of the thing goes, I was like, well, I know they meditate. I know that they can reach out through the Force. Now, is there a blue protective barrier that we've seen before? No, not really. But I don't know. I was okay. I do agree though that the sequence was a bit long and sort of a little redundant. Like he went to try to grab him, 3 times?
Yeah.
So that was a bit redundant. I also thought that even though I saw better tactics in general from stormtroopers, and they were trying to use like their big gun to mow them down and things like that, I still thought like, man, they continue to let themselves be picked off so easily. Like they're going uphill. They're just walking uphill. But overall, I wasn't super bothered by it.
Yeah. This one wasn't a big dislike, but I didn't like that he took off his helmet in the Empire stronghold and then put it back on and then took it off later. It would have been a much bigger payoff if the only time this season he took off the helmet was with Grogu at the very end. But we just saw in the previous episode that he took off his helmet. Right. You could argue, well, he only took off his helmet because he wanted to save Grogu. That was his main thing, right? But I just felt like there was a different way you could have written that as well, so that it could have been an even bigger payoff. Because when he takes off his helmet for Grogu in the final scene, I felt like as a viewer, we're all pretty comfortable with him taking off his
Yeah.
helmet by this point.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I didn't think about that because I was okay with. Let me put it this way: I never like got the whole thing. Like, why can't you take your helmet? They explain it loosely, like, well, it's just the way. It's the way. But it's such a silly way that I'm like, whatever. But at the same time, it is the thing in the show. So you're right. Like to show us that finally he does it because he has no choice to go in and get the thing. Plus, actually, no. Now I'm actually annoyed because I actually forgot that I was pissed off. Like they have a face scanner for no reason other than to scan a face. Because certainly, if they're gonna scan his face, some information is gonna come up, and they're gonna know, hey, wait, this isn't a stormtrooper, or this isn't, or even worse, oh, he's in our database, right? Like, I didn't get that at all. Wait, they just scan his face to make sure. So droids can't interact with it. Is that it?
No,
like,
they talked about this. They said, and it is dumb, but the one detail to add to what you're saying is they scanned your face to see if you were a bad guy to them, So,
and they don't have it. I guess he's not in the records at all.
But yeah,
because they've never seen his face.
Right, they've never seen his face.
Okay,
yeah,
but he's also not in the records. Why is he extracting information?
Right.
How does that work? Anyone with a key,
Right.
it would think it'd be the opposite. Like, we don't recognize your face, dude.
Yeah.
Why are you extracting information from here?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So now I totally agree with you that was a waste. Because it would have been the big payoff at the end. We'll finally see his face. Imagine actually if we had never seen his face, even in the first season or anything.
Right.
We finally see his face, and it's to say bye to Grogu.
Right. So two last things. One is I want to congratulate Jon Favreau for writing, because he wrote most of this season and has been essentially the leader. He directed some episodes of both seasons.
Great stuff.
He created, him and Dave Filoni, by the way, really created something special that it's hard, as we all know, some of the greats, J.J. Abrams, considered one of the best filmmakers of our time, made one of the worst, if not the, I'm just going to say it, he made a thing worse than the Christmas special in episode 9.
I'm not going to go that far.
Well, it's at least on par with it. And
no, I still like episode 1 worse, though, because it sets off a chain of events that is horrible.
So I'm just going to congratulate Jon Favreau for making something just really great. And he obviously put a lot of thought and consulted with a lot of people and just did a really great job, and it's just nice to see. And he's had quite a career. He should be heralded as in the same breath as some of the great filmmakers of all time, with what he has done with that sort of thing. But final question, Berto. So by episode 7, and particularly by the time we hear in episode 8 about Luke and Ben Solo, Grogu is no longer around, presumably, right?
But I mean, they live. Oh, I see. You're saying something bad might have happened to him.
Right. So did Ben kill Grogu?
Ooh,
Because Luke takes Grogu to his
Grogu.
and Grogu is one of those Yoda creatures that lives hundreds of years. Grogu is like 50 years old or something, and so
no, he's alive. He's alive. He's alive. Because they're gonna need to leapfrog past the episode 9 business and still give us something, and so Grogu's still alive.
Okay.
Who knows? But yeah, I want him to be alive. Why? That's a waste,
Yeah.
By the way, did I ever tell you that when I was watching Empire, remember I was 5, right? And then subsequently after when I rewatched it, when I saw Yoda and he says, when 900 years you be, let's see, blah, blah. I assumed that he was a human. And it's just that's what humans in this world look like when they got that old.
Yeah, I remember thinking that. Too. And I think it was kind of implied that his race didn't look like that, or at least the race that he came from didn't look like that when they were born. That his race looked a lot less wrinkly, when they were young.
Right. And part of it is because as a little kid, anyone above 10 looks old, let alone 30, 40, 50, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So to me, when I watched the movies, Ben looked, okay, he's like an old person, right? And then the Emperor, oh, that's even more crusty and old. But Yoda is like really, really old.
Yeah. All right. Well, that does it for that nerd episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.